Hey guys, welcome back. This is Dave with Alum House Sound, and I'm happy that you're here today. We're going to be going through a highly requested video. Many people obviously are running the X32. Most people are doing live streaming right now, and some people have even graduated to not just mixing in the soundboard like what we've got a lot of videos about, but mixing in a DAW. So they're using a laptop and all of the good things of a DAW, a Digital Audio Workstation, something like Pro Tools or Reaper or Presonus is the one that I'll be using today. But anyway, they're mixing in a DAW, and then they have to get that mixed signal back into their console so they can route it to their video switcher. So there's a lot of different pieces in this puzzle. There's a lot of moving things and parts that we need to address. We're going to walk through that right now. All right, so before we dive into the console or into the DAW or any of that, I want to take a second and just kind of talk through the overarching concept of what we're going to do. So we've got our stage, okay? Somehow you're getting inputs, and you've got your soundboard down here. In our example, it'll be the X32, and your stage is sending signal to your soundboard. Okay, for me, it's across AES 50. Now, after that, we've got a DAW that we need to get these inputs or signals into. So we're going to come across USB. For us, that USB takes all 32 channels across to the DAW. Now we're going to build our mix, and in our DAW, we have our main output. And we need to map that main output back over to the soundboard, and that's going to be across USB. Now we need to section off 2 channels on the soundboard so that we can effectively visualize and then reroute this audio. So for us, we're going to bring it in on AUX 1 and 2. Okay, auxiliary 1 and 2 will be our inputs. And that allows us to not only visualize on the board, but also reroute, because this has to go out to some XLR outputs, which we're going to use out 13 and 14. Those will come back out of the board, and that will take it into our switcher. I can't spell this morning, but that's our switcher here for our video, and that's how the audio is going to map into our video switcher so that we can get it to our stream. All right, so we'll take a quick snapshot here of the console. Pretty basic setup. We've got all of our inputs here. We've got a couple DCAs we're running. Some of the decisions that we want to make are how many inputs are we using here? How many auxiliary inputs are we using? And in terms of outputs, do we have any extra outputs? And what I mean by that is I've got some in-ear monitors going on here. I've got some groups that I've got for drums and for band. And then I have some my live stream, which is bus 11 and 12. That's just on my specific setup. But 13, 14 are outputs that are available. They're being used internally for some effects, but the actual physical outputs on the back of the board are not being used. 15, 16 outputs are the main out on this console. So 13, 14 are available for me to use as an XLR output on the back of the board, and that's the important thing to know. So in our setup right now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be listening to some music across these inputs here. So if I start my music, if I just hit play on some music, you can see that I've got some audio coming through. It is pretty hot from my iPad right now. Let me just turn that down a touch. There we go. All right, so we've got some audio that's playing and coming in here. What we're going to do in this example is route this audio so that it can go out from our USB connection into our DAW, and then it's going to come back into the DAW. It's going to be seen here on auxiliary 1 and 2, so we've got a couple things we need to do on that to prep that. and then we're also going to route that out, that final signal out to output 1314. So let's do some things here first. I'm going to select AUX 1, and I'm going to come up to my screen up here, and I'm going to hit the link button. And it says, do you really want to link 1 and 2? And I say yes. And so now when I bring up fader 1, it brings fader 2 with it as well. We're just going to bring it up to 0 for right now. I also want to go in and change this color. So I'm going to go into the setup window, and I'm going to page over to the name and icon. And for me right now, I'm just going to make them white. They're going to stick out. And if I push it to invert, then you can see it's really white over there. You could change the name from AUX 1 and 2 to stream, whatever you want to do. You can make those changes, but for right now, that's going to help us to identify where our stream comes back in. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to dive into this screen here to do some routing, so let's zoom in now. All right, so here we are up close and personal with the menu, so we're going to hit routing. And routing, we're just going to kind of work our way from left to right, and then we got to come back from the right to the left. But to get started here, you can see that all of my inputs, as I mentioned, are coming in across AES50A and for this scene. So AES50A, and then my aux ins, which becomes important later on, aux in is mapped to just the auxiliary inputs on the back of the console. So right now we're not going to change anything because we want to be able to see our audio coming in here on the screen. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to page over to card. Okay, and in this example, I also have AES50 1 through 24, which are going out my card, and then my auxiliaries right now are going out as well. That's what's going to take my signal from this board for this example over to my DAW. So we're not going to change anything there because these are all outputs. All right, so we're going to scoot and page over all the way down here to our users settings. Now on the user settings, what we're going to do is map from our DAW back in on our card to auxiliary 1 and 2. So to do that, we want to come over to input, and the easiest thing for us to do is use user input 1 through 8, and we're going to take input 1 and we're going to go down to card and choose card 1. Then we'll go to next, which is going to be card in 2. That's going to bring the audio from our DAW back into the console. Now we need to keep going to be able to still use our auxiliary ins. So input 3, we're going to map over here to auxiliary in 3. 4 is going to go to 4. 5 will go to 5, and 6 will go to 6. Okay, so when we make our change back on the input side, now auxiliary in is going to have, in 1 and 2 is going to have signal from the card, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 will stay as normal. So that's all we need to do over here at this point. So now we're going to go back over to our inputs, and you see we still have signal playing here from our iPod. So if I scroll down and I get all the way down to user, see I can choose user in 1 through 6. So when I choose that, we'll keep our audio because it's still letting 5 and 6 come in from the back of the board. In fact, 3, 4, 5, and 6 from the back of the board. The only thing that we've changed is that inputs 1 and 2 for auxiliaries are coming from our card, which will be our DAW audio coming in. So the next thing that we need to do is jump over to our DAW, so we're going to do that right now. All right, so as we dive into the computer and the DAW, I use StudioOne. I'm on the Pro version. I've mixed in this for years. First thing I need to do is come in and configure my device. So if you're in Logic or if you're in Pro Tools or Ableton, whatever you're using, you're going to need to obviously adjust these steps accordingly. But for this case, I am using StudioOne. So we're going to come in here, and first I'm just going to hit built-in input. I'm going to change it, and that just helps me know that I've got a fresh connection to my X32. Once I've done that, then I can go back, hit X32 or XUSB. You might be using the X Live card. One of my guys recently I ran into is using the X Live card because it also gives him some additional features. That would be called X Live instead of X USB. All right, we're going to hit OK, and at this point we can come in and create a song. Now I've got a template already set up, and I'll just kind of walk you through what I've done for this. When I hit into my song here, what I have are a handful of tracks here, okay? And all of these tracks on the left-hand side are my inputs. So kick, snare, some toms, overheads, bass. These are all the inputs coming from stage. They're coming into the console, then they're coming from the console into the soundboard across USB. So let's look at that. I come up here, and for me, I go to Song and Song Setup, and I have to map my inputs. So you can see input 1 comes from input 1, input 2 within Presonus, where the top ones here are from the USB card. So anyway, these are mapped. I've got 32 channels that I've mapped coming in and out. So it's this kind of standard matrix if you've seen anything with Dante or anything else. I've got 32 in, and I have the ability of 32 channels. You can see right now actually my audio coming across channel 29 and 30, and that's just where I routed my my laptop audio, my card, to get audio in. Anyway, we also need to map the outputs. So if I look at output, by default, see how I get main output set up here as left and right, but I also have sub out. Now sub out is if I wanted to use this for a virtual sound check, what I can do is use these sub outputs so that I have a one-to-one mapping again of channel 1 would go to sub out 1, which would go to USB 1 out here. I'm going to say that again, and let me just show you actually. If I come over here and I expand channel 1, so it's input 1, which means it's getting input from my USB input channel 1. And then for me, I'm sending it back out. See this? This is a pre-fader mix, and it's going sub out 1. And what that's going to do is it's going to send it right back out USB 1 and into my card, which would allow me to do a virtual sound check. You'll see that I have here, I'll give you a different look here if I expand this up. So now we have channel 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. So they map directly out. So I can use those outputs. This apparently is incorrect over here. I'm going to remove that. But anyway, you can see that these are mapping direct out, and I could do a virtual sound check. Notice right now how I've turned off sub out 1 and sub out 2 because we're going to use those in a minute. All right, I'm going to hide this stuff back again. This is not a Presonus tutorial. So I'm going to come back into my song setup and my routing. Now, what I'm going to do for ease of use is I'm actually going to unmap those from sub out 1 and 2 so that output 1 and 2 is just my left and right main outs. You see that? You can actually see audio coming in there right now. Well, the music just stopped apparently. But you can see audio coming in right there. I'm going to hit apply, and at this point there we've got some audio has started back, and you can see the little meters kind of popping up in there. So that's our inputs are coming in, they're all mapped, and then our outputs, the only thing that we really care about right now in this example is that our main out goes out 1 and 2, which is USB. So I'm going to hit OK. Now we want to come into the DAW and we want to make sure that these things are set up properly. So I want to make sure that I do have, I'm going to expand this, I want to make sure that I do have, see, of all my 32 inputs, I want to make sure that these are mapped properly. So input 1 is going where I want it to. In this case, it's my kick drum. All right, if I click this here, input 2, that's coming in on 2, that's my snare drum. If I wanted to change this and make this, let's say, whatever this is, 29, see, now I have, this is my iPod music that's coming in, that's playing through the board, because that's coming in on input 29. So I want to keep these set up properly so that I can get all of my instruments coming in, and they're going to map over here. Now, again, see, I've got laptop left, laptop right. That's my iPod music that's coming from the board. That's plugged into the RCA jacks on the back of the board, and I just happen to route that and map it here to 29 and 30. You can also see that these are going over to, so the other thing is that these can map over to subgroups. So right now I have this mapped to the main out, but if I happen to, as an example, make this into a bus, then the bus, if I turn the bus to not map to my main outs, see how I have audio coming in my channels, it's going to this bus, but now that bus is not going to my main outs, so I don't see any audio over here on the far right. So I'm going to put this back into my main out, which means that it's going to send over here, and then I've got the ability to turn volume up or down. You can see that. You can do limiting, processing. If I put some insert effects. So as we look at this now, you've got the ability to do any bussing and any mixing that you want to do in your DAW. All of that's going to be sent to your main out. Now the last thing is this right here. This output, see how it groups it in pairs. All right, so I still have to select this over here. So I could send this to any one or pair, I should say, of outputs on USB. It's all up to you. The only thing that I'm taking back into my desk right now on USB into the console is this signal. So I'm happy to have it on 1 and 2. We've already done that routing. So I'm happy to have this on output 1 and 2. That's going to send all of these signals back down the card 1 and 2. So the next thing we need to do is also, a little side note, see how in this I have recording is armed, which is why I'm seeing the signal. That's these little red buttons here. But the other thing is the monitoring. If I have monitoring turned off, the signal comes in, but see how it doesn't replicate all the way down? You need to make sure that you have monitoring turned on to be able to get all of these signals. Now also don't forget you can pan left and right here. So if I turn my left down, see how I lose my left signal? All right, that keeps our individualness of our panning. So you've got all of those features in the DAW, and the biggest thing is that we're going to send out 1 and 2 back into our card. Let's dive back into the console now, and we can catch up with routing this back into the console on auxiliary 1 and 2, and then we can also send that out to our streaming device, whether it be a switcher or whatever the case is. All right, so at this point, we have routed our inputs through USB into our DAW. You've done whatever mixing you wanted to do in your DAW. You've routed from your main output in your DAW back in to auxiliary in, and you can see it coming in on auxiliary 1 and 2 on your faders. Now we just have to get that to map wherever you want that to go for your stream. In our example, like I mentioned, we're using output 13 and 14. And so what we need to do is come back up here to our routing screen. We're going to go over here to the tab called Out, and we're going to come down and find auxiliary output 13. And for me, I'm going to go direct out, and I need to find direct out aux 1, and I select that. Then I go down to output 14, also direct out, and this is going to be direct out aux 2. And so that completes the cycle of sending our audio from the console into the DAW. The DAW comes back in, it's visualized on 2 inputs, in this case auxiliary 1 and 2 from our card, and then we have mapped those to go out, physical outputs on the back of the board, some XLR outputs that you could map out to your and physically connect to your video switcher. Now I'll throw this in here. If you don't want to use output 13 because maybe you're using an ATEM mini or something that you're just going from 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch outputs, what you can do is leave these where they were. This was probably on mix bus 13, and this was on mix bus 14. And what I can do is I can come over to the auxiliary. And auxiliary 1 and 2, we would just do the same thing. We would map direct out, and we would come down here, and we would take aux 1, and then direct out. Auxiliary 2 would be direct out aux 2, and that would get your signal into some 1/4-inch jacks on the back of the console that, again, you could use a 1/8-inch to 1/4-inch TRS plug and get that 1/8-inch headphone size jack into your video switcher that way, or into your whatever device you're using. Okay guys, so like I said, that was a bunch of routing and information and setup. There's a lot of thought process that goes into a routing configuration like this. And so we always want to start with it on paper. That tends to help me at least. And then get it into the console and go step by step, checking along the way that my signal is getting properly routed. I've got the appropriate panning left and right. All of those things need to be addressed along the way. So I hope the video has been helpful. If you like this kind of content, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Putting out content every week, and hopefully you're finding some value in it. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.